only assignment in the back. Wow, we have a lot of people online.
Yes.
2 pages,
Why don't
in
you
fact.
click the people button, Heather, so we can just pop that out so we can see who's kind of here and things like that. Yeah, so one, this.
My attendees.
Yeah, there's some of
One, two, three. Yeah,
Goes well.
I don't know, the last time I saw Fresca.
Nice,
It's pretty
right?
good, though.
So I went and visited my dad, and I was on responsible because I was
Settings,
out
it's
at
just
my
a matter
rotary
of
meeting,
like.
I'll grab the drinks.
Whatever.
And I visited my dad, and he had this Fresca.
No, until you
He's like,
say it.
that
I'm like,
stuff's
oh,
good,
who is
and it's like better than a bubble water, but it's still like,
Right?
doesn't,
Oh,
yeah,
pretty damn good.
yeah. I was like, what is this witchcraft?
Next month you'll show up with the clear Pepsi.
Yeah, exactly.
To be gentle. Good afternoon. Welcome to the, when is this, September meeting of the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. I'd like to call the Board of Directors meeting to order. Heather, would you do a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Chair Saxon,
Here.
Vice Chair Lovell, Director Cutchin,
Here.
Director Hensley,
Here.
Director Keating,
I'm
Director Johnston.
here.
Okay, Director Johnston,
Here.
Director Plummer,
Here.
Director Settlemeyer,
In the
Director Stout.
Here.
Okay, we do have-
Here, quorum. Thank you. Are there any adjustments to today's agenda?
Howard, I have an adjustment to the agenda. I'd like to add before the public comments, a director's briefing for community correspondence that I've received over the last couple of days, which I think would be good to brief the board about.
Is that acceptable to everyone?
Mhm.
Thank you. All right, we now move to public participation. The first item will be comments on today's public agenda. And this is an opportunity for the public to bring up any item that they'd like to comment. Again, that's on today's published agenda. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment?
Regarding today's published agenda.
I think we're on the agenda.
Yes, so there are some copies there. So we'd entertain comments on anything that's on the published agenda.
That are not on the agenda?
Well, this is a
That'll be the
moment, there'll be an
next one.
opportunity
Great.
for public comment on topics that are not on today's agenda.
Great. Thank you.
I've got it, I'm looking through it.
Okay. Before we start
Thank you.
accepting public comment, I'd like to recognize Travis to give some context to an issue that some people may be here that would like to speak on. So go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Howard, members of the board. I want to take just a moment to provide a briefing to the board as well as everybody in the room about some emails that I have received personally and some of those emails that have been directed to the board as well. There's been about 50 or so emails over the last 48 hours that were addressed to me or to the board. And also recognizing that we have some public participation in the room today as well. And I believe that these things are very much related. So I want to just provide some context and a briefing to everybody. The emails that I have received over the last day or two have been aligned or share a lot of similarities to many formal public comments that we received on an indirect source construction permit under LRAPA's Title 20 for an e-commerce facility in West Eugene. And I believe that, or many of these comments express some of their concerns about environmental impacts on the wetlands, the airshed, as well as infrastructure, as well as other traffic concerns. First, I want to say I really appreciate that email and that engagement from folks. It's really helpful to assure that LRAPA, as an organization myself, we're aware of the issues that are really important to the community perspective. And so that feedback, that engagement is the best way for us to have the center of mind. So we're not bypassing unnecessarily these things that are very important to everybody. I think that ahead of public comments, what would be helpful is providing some of the context and setting some clarity on what LRAPA's role here is in Lane County in our implementing the Clean Air Act and how it relates to the indirect source permits for the e-commerce facility that we had on public notice earlier this year. So essentially the way it works is the federal law establishes the Clean Air Act, and under it is the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and there's federal rules of how these air quality standards are to be enforced. And under the Clean Air Act, the implementation of those rules and regulations gets passed down in authority one more time to the state authority, that in Oregon, that's held by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And the state can choose to be more strict or more stringent than those federal rules, but they have to be at least as strict or stringent as the federal rules. And then what can happen under the Clean Air Act is that state and federal authority can be passed down one more time to the local level, to the county level. And in Lane County, that is what happened, and that is where LRAPA exists. And so we are a third layer of regulatory oversight on the implementation of the Clean Air Act. And similar to the state, LRAPA's rules have to be at least as strict or stringent as the federal and the state rules, but there is an opportunity for local rules to be more strict than the state. And the governing body here, LRAPA's Board of Directors, is that governing body that gets to make that decision of how much more strict, if at all, LRAPA's rules are in comparison to the state rules. LRAPA's board is made up of elected officials from our partners, as well as some appointed at-large members, all of which are volunteer time and effort to help LRAPA decide, how extra strict or otherwise our rules are in comparison to the states and federal. But to be clear that the board nor myself as director have the authority to outright deny any permit that we would be issued from a permit application that we receive. And so how that connects to this indirect source permit is on Title 20. So Title 20 is LRAPA's set of regulations that requires any business within 5 miles of the Eugene-Springfield area that has more than 250 parking spaces that will be filled by presumably combustion engine vehicles will be going in. Outside of Lane County, DEQ's equivalent of Title 20, that threshold of 250 is actually 1,000. So in relation to the e-commerce facility, the permit that we issued and the opportunity for public engagement and public comment is not something that outside of Lane County would exist. This is a conversation that gets to happen and gets to take place because of the board authority in this room that says we want our thresholds to be at this level more strict than what that state threshold is. So earlier this year, LRAPA had an application for an indirect source permit for an e-commerce facility out in Western Eugene. During that public comment period, LRAPA received over 300 permits, 300 formal comments on that permit. And at the moment, we're in a process of digesting, reviewing, and reflecting those formal comments, and then seeing how we can engage with the source and where adjustments can be made. And again, I want to express my appreciation for those comments, for that public engagement, because that provides us with that local perspective, that awareness of what those community priorities are, and that helps to inform our conversation with the source and their application, our review of it. And those comments that are substantive in nature, which means that in the context of our rules and regulations, so in this circumstance, Title 20, and the permit within that title, comments that are within that context are very helpful and useful as we're assuring that the permit we're issuing, how can it be improved under the context of our rules and regulations? So for that formal public comment period that closed on the e-commerce facility in July 22nd, we have been engaged with the applicant and are reviewing what those public comments are and the ones that had substantive nature or comments to them. The conversation with the source is how can we meet these substantive comments and what changes to the permit are appropriate to better meet this local community perspective. So the only, so to be clear though, that LRAPA as well as the board do not have any legal authority to unilaterally deny any permit that we issue. The e-commerce facility permit is one that there's no authority to unilaterally deny that issuance of that permit. However, the public process, the public comment period, which exists in Lane County, but for the same project outside of Lane County would not exist, is an opportunity for us to hear that local perspective and to refine and improve the permit based off those substantive comments we received. So the only update that I have to share on that particular project is we have received those formal comments and they are informing our ongoing engagement with the applicant. And we don't have at this point in time any formal response ready to present to those formal comments that were submitted earlier in July. So I thought that that could be some helpful context setting and some clarity ahead of the public comments that we have from, I think a number of people here want to speak to this exact item to the board. And I felt that that could be helpful ahead of that conversation. So Howard, I'll turn it back to you and the board for any comments before we move into public comment.
Any comments from the board? Okay, well, again, we'll next item on the agenda is any public comments on an item that is on today's agenda. Time is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We always will welcome any written comments in lieu of any verbal comments that anyone wishes to address to the board. So are there any members of the public that they would like to speak on a topic that is on today's published agenda? Seeing none.
Raven Thompson just online. Is there now? Should I go ahead and unmute?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Should I go ahead and start?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, LRAPA, for allowing the community to provide public comment today regarding the proposed e-commerce facility off of Highway 99. My name.
Excuse me, pardon me. This particular agenda item is to allow the public to comment on items that are on today's agenda. The next agenda item will be to accept comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda. The e-commerce facility is one of those items that is not on our agenda. So I believe you were the only person that wanted to speak on a item that was on the agenda. So if I think that's the case. So if not, if so, why don't we just go ahead and go to the next agenda item, which is public comment on topics that are not on today's agenda. And again, you have 3 minutes to provide your comment. We will obviously accept any written comments you'd like to provide. So why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay, sorry about that. My name is Raven Thompson, a community member here in Eugene, and thank you so much for allowing us to provide comment today on topics that are not on the agenda. When looking at the permitting requirements, scope of the proposed facility, and the traffic to be expected where the center is in use, we highly encourage LRAPA to consider the health and environmental impacts this will have on neighboring communities and businesses. Many other states and counties and cities have shared their frustration concerns around distribution centers in their communities. And in 2021, the state of California reported 3,000 Amazon distribution centers located in Southern California, ranking the highest percentile of toxic emissions in the state. In 2023, the state of Washington did the first study of its kind to look at the air pollution impacts in the area of these different delivery drivers as well as distribution centers. They focused on Amazon's last mile delivery stations in Seattle metro area. In the last stops before its packages hits your doorstep, the team found that the people living within those 2 miles of these hubs are exposed to more delivery-related air pollutions. Aside from thinking of air pollution and the impacts on communities, there are other concerns such as traffic and the amount of trucks that will be constantly entering and leaving the distribution center. It says that a vehicle trip every 28 seconds, 20 hours a day, and the amount of trips per day, which will be about 2,592. The emissions and the VOCs from the trucks being used, while California is in the process of requiring electric vehicles only, the city is considering something similar when thinking of this permit. We also haven't scratched the surfaces when it comes to thinking about the harmful working conditions and wages that many of these folks in these distribution centers across the US have experienced. So thank you, and I really appreciate the time that you have allowed me to share about this issue and hope you put this in consideration.
Jack Dawson. You hear us, I think?
If you want to unmute and provide your comment, this is a good opportunity for you.
Hey, can you all hear me? Okay, thank you. Yeah, firstly, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to give public comment. I want to give a public comment about the proposed e-commerce facility. I just wanted to point out, as I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but as you pointed out at the beginning, Eugene's or Lane County's air requirements are more stringent, that we do limit this to 250 parking spaces. I think that's a great thing. Eugene has to deal with a lot of, air pollution from other sources. I mean, I'm sure you all have had to deal with the wildfire smoke. And at least in my opinion, we really need to uphold these stringent requirements. So I urge LRAPA to enforce these stringent air requirements that are already in place on this proposed e-commerce facility. The last thing we need is more air pollution and more traffic. And so I encourage you to strongly consider the health and environmental impacts of this proposed site. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any others online?
No, Chair, unless they're, tell us in a moment.
Okay.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and proceed to people that are in attendance.
So the first one that's here on the list, if there's an interest in expressing public comment, is Jojo Renslin? Breslin, thank you.
I'll be pretty short and sweet, I suppose. Pretty much on the same topic, talking about the e-commerce facility in West 11th. Just wanted to, again, kind of implore you guys to keep looking at the permit. I appreciate Travis for the context of that as well. I think, with the possibility of over 2,500 vehicle trips per day and the adding to on-road emissions, which is already the third highest cancer causing, I believe, based on the statistics I found on LRAPA, behind secondary emissions and biogenics. I myself work at a cancer clinic here in town, and so I kind of can see firsthand where the, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like stringent hold that we have right now in healthcare kind of is, especially with the lack of hospitals in Lane County, unfortunately. So I think with just the impact as well as the environment more appropriately with how it connects with LRAPA and the watershed, just wanted to kind of express and urge you guys to look deeper into the permit. So that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next on the sign-up sheet is Rebecca Chapman.
Yes. Hi there. My name is Rebecca Chapman with Indivisible Eugene Springfield. We represent many local residents in the area. We are strongly against the Amazon building a huge e-commerce facility in Eugene. Amazon plans to build a 325,000 plus square foot center on 84 acres of farmland near the Eugene Airport also paving over 9 acres of wetlands. This is urgent because 4 of the 18 permits needed have already been approved. The facility would have about 1,000 parking spaces for delivery trucks, 268 parking spaces for workers, and create 2,592 trips per day for 20 hours each day, increasing traffic on Highway 99 by 16%. Each year, this traffic would generate 20 tons of particulate emissions and 39 tons of volatile organic compounds, including formaldehyde. Willamette Valley is subject to heat domes, inversions, and wildfire smoke, which cause air pollution to stagnate in the valley, driving our air quality into the very unhealthy zones. The proposed Amazon facility would increase our air pollution even more, not to mention damage our roads, increase highway and air traffic, and create noise and light pollution affecting wildlife and local farms and residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have Michael Zhang.
Oh, I thought that was the meeting, like to get in.
Oh,
there. Sorry.
did you not want to comment? Okay.
Thank you.
And then Kaylee Sweet.
Hi, my name is Kaylee Sweet. I manage a native foods nursery here in the county, and I am here today to speak on behalf of myself and the other employees there who spend the entirety of our work days outside. So Native Foods Nursery is a micro business that employs 3 to 10 employees throughout the season. And again, our entire day is spent working outside. We already have a lot of difficulty competing with the culture of immediacy where people are wanting things in the here and now. As a micro business, it takes us longer to get things out. And it feels like that is exacerbated frequently by the air quality being so poor that I have to send employees home for their and my health and safety. During these periods of higher quality, we have sometimes gone a week or more without being able to process our orders and get them out because it absolutely just is not safe for us to work in that environment. And so my concern is around increasing the ground and potentially air traffic would absolutely decrease the air quality and have direct negative effects on our ability to continue carrying out business in a way that supports the health and safety of our employees. So I am here today representing blue collar workers countywide who spend a majority of their time outside, and I am hoping that you will take all of our health into consideration while you are working on this permit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lance Colby.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Or Laura, excuse me. And then Charmaine Landing.
Thank you for hearing us today. I'm Charmaine Landing. I just have a couple short points. One was Eugene area has billed itself as Tracktown USA. We have people from all over the world coming here, and especially in the summer. The winds come from the north in the summer. I mean, to keep pollution down, I think would be really important. You know, sometimes when I drive in from the coast or the mountains in the summer, the air here is already kind of murky. So I would like, it would be good not to add to that. The other thing I was concerned about is that I assume that this e-commerce facility will have planes flying in. And I looked at the Main Suite Airport, their grant was denied or wasn't accepted under the new administration. And one of the things that was denied is a $400,000 grant to study the airport's carbon emissions and related recommendations to reduce them. So I was wondering, will LRAPA take over this pollution study, or will it pay for it, or will it not happen? So that, anyway, thank you.
Teresa Mueller.
I wasn't going to talk, but I can give you my visual comment.
I see.
What does it say?
Amazon.
Scram Amazon.
Thank you, Teresa.
Sure.
And Christian Winterin.
I was just signing up. No,
Oh, okay, thank you. And that's for all the in-person participation today. I know, Heather, we had somebody who looks like joined online.
It was, there is a hand up. Yeah, I'll go and. Okay.
I think you missed the mic, actually.
Okay, Victoria online, would you like to provide any comments at this time? The microphone is muted.
Victoria, are you there? You can hear us. If you want to unmute your mic and provide your public comment, we are ready for that.
Okay, well, I think we'll move on.
Chair, can I ask, is it possible for the board to ask a question of public commenters?
Of course.
If I may, can I ask a question of the Native Foods Nursery? What is the, what do you use to determine, and this is, I think, a well-meant question, what do you consider safe for your workers outside? Is there a specific air quality index number that you follow? I honestly just don't know. I would love to know.
Yes, so whenever the air quality is over 100, I advise that they don't come in. But if it gets to about 140 or higher, I tell them to not come in. Whenever the air quality is around 80, I provide masks for people to wear at work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay. Well, for those that provided comment intended, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and expressing your concerns, and staff, as Travis said, is currently evaluating all the public comments that were submitted on a permit, and those will be evaluated. And as Travis said, any modifications indicated to the permit application will, that will be made in discussions with the applicant. So still in the process, it's moving forward. So again, thank you very much for attending today.
And Howard, if I could just add one reflective thought, I again really value the participation in the back. There's a QR code for our newsletter if you're not already signed up for it. Whenever LRAPA is issuing a permit on a stationary source, that in one of our titles is our public participation title that says if this is happening with this particular source, there needs to be a public comment period. And we send those out, and that's the opportunity to review all of the stationary source permits that we're issuing and providing some of that feedback. And the comments that within the context of our rules and regulation and air, those comments that we receive that we refer to as substantive comments become talking points with the applicant following that public comment. And so that's where that public participation is designed. And I really value that engagement. And so if you're not already on our list, where whenever we have that public noticing take place, in the back, there's a QR code where you can sign up and start receiving those. So just want to point that resource out.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
The permit process, you're evaluating one point on the process. There are many permits that have to be passed. What are the other agencies? Will it come back to you a second time for a different issue? Or do you just have this one comment and then it gets spread out to other agencies?
So in general, it's just the Clean Air Act implementation. So it's what's that air pollution, what is the regulation related to those emissions, and creating that permit. And then LRAPA's role beyond that is then following up through inspection to assure that those permit conditions, that if the source follows, is meeting all the rules and regulations from the federal to the state to the local level. The next touch point with those sources is oftentimes if they have reporting requirements they send to us, we say, well, you need to demonstrate that your emissions are over this limit or not over this limit. And one of the ways of doing that is through your record keeping, showing how many widgets you may be creating, for example. And those records help support our understanding of those limits and if they're under or within. So those are the ongoing touch points. But once an applicant has the permit through us, how that relates from a land use planning to other organizations in their permitting process, we have dialogue with one another, but it's not a fully collaborative, comprehensive connection.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, thanks, everyone. Next on the agenda is comments from board members.
Yeah, with your permission, Chair, I'd like to take a brief pause to remember September 11th and the lost lives and the resilience of our nation.
Thank you.
Thank you, and may we never forget.
Sorry, to make a comment. Great. Well, first of all, I want to thank all the members of the public that came out to testify today and that have submitted written comments about the proposed Amazon e-commerce facility. I had a chance to look through the comments that the agency received and was really taken aback by the kind of breadth of opposition coming from folks living throughout Lane County and West Eugene specifically. In my 3 years on the LRAPA board, I've never seen this level of public engagement on any issue. During the comment period, we received almost 350 written comments opposing the project, citing concerns ranging from air pollution to truck traffic to the impacts to local small businesses to Amazon's terrible anti-union reputation and more. I want to take this opportunity to voice my personal opposition to the Amazon Distribution Center and my concerns about the potential air quality impacts that this facility poses to Lane County and to West Eugene in particular. According to recent reporting on the project, the facility will include approximately 1,400 parking spaces and would increase truck traffic dramatically in the West Eugene area. I'm extremely concerned about the air impacts associated with the traffic, including the emissions of harmful smog-forming pollutants, including carbon monoxide and nitrous oxide from car exhaust, not to mention the carbon dioxide associated with the facility. It's also important to note that this facility is located in West Eugene, an area that has historically been impacted by polluting industry and which has significantly worse air quality than the rest of the city of Eugene and some of the worst in the county. West Eugene is also home to some of the most diverse and lowest income communities in our city, and it's clear that this is an environmental justice issue, plain and simple. According to data from Beyond Toxics, over 550,000 pounds of toxic emissions were released in West Eugene in 2019 alone, making up over 95% of all toxic emissions in the city of Eugene. The Bethel neighborhood, one of the closest neighborhoods to the facility, is a working class community where over 90% of residents are considered low income, with a higher percentage of communities of color compared to the rest of the city. Residents live among several polluting factories and industries, which accounted for 96% of all toxic emissions released in the city in 2019. And asthma rates in the Bethel School District are almost double to those of other neighborhoods in Eugene. This facility would only worsen these impacts to West Eugene residents and is completely out of line with local climate and clean air goals. In just the past few months, LRAPA issued an ozone advisory, and it's important to note that these pollutants would only increase potential ozone threats to folks in the Southern Willamette Valley. I also just want to quickly note from my perspective as an elected union leader, my strong objections to Amazon's labor practices, from high-profile multi-million-dollar union busting campaigns to horrific labor standards that have led to multiple employee deaths in fulfillment centers. Amazon has made clear that they do not value their workers, and they have a long track record of putting their profits over their people, the communities that they have their facilities in, and our global climate and environment. I believe that the agency must closely analyze all emissions associated with the project, including any potential upstream emissions associated with increased air traffic. And in my opinion, the agency should reject the permit in light of the significant pollution. At the very least, LRAPA must require commitments from Amazon for 100% electric fleet to serve the facility in order to address some of these pollution concerns. And finally, just looking forward, with the understanding that more warehouses might be proposed similar to this, I believe that the board should consider developing an indirect source rule for proposed warehouses similar to those in place and at the California South Coast Air Quality Management District in Southern California. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Any other comments from the board? Go ahead.
Oh, you're pointing to me. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I remember in the 1980s, we had an aircraft manufacturer that wanted to come to the Portland area. It was promising 1,000 family wage jobs. And long story short, Lane County chased that aircraft manufacturer out of our economic development forum because, quote, they were a nuclear free zone. So this idea of sometimes our positions and our ideologies that we find ourselves in the Southern Willamette Valley sometimes hinder economic growth. We understand now that we're under serious budget considerations. I know the county's $6.8 million in the deficit. Eugene is $15 million in the deficit. We're facing population changes in our area to the negative. We're also having businesses leave at a record rate. We're number 39th out of 50 states to attract new business. I think the idea of dismissing this area of economic gain or development to offset what we're lost in timber revenues is maybe a little bit short-sighted. we should maybe consider that the economic development is the thing that budgets and helps fund the various services that we're trying to retain within our homeless communities and our service communities, even down to single moms who get nurses who visit their homes twice a month to make sure that their kids are doing well and thriving. If we look at the AQI data, our air quality index data, based on some of the comments, we see that there was one time in the last year that Lane County broke the moderate index of 100, and the other 2 or 3 spikes were just in Oak Ridge proper. So that tells me that maybe the numbers of people's concerns may be a bit inflated, so I think we should take an accurate look at that. And secondly, some of the parking concerns, you look at the loss of employment and driving losses that we've suffered just in Springfield from the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, which had 1,200 workers and spots for that. That's now not on the calculation piece. And that Sony has also had that same number, not on the calculation piece. So cumulatively, both of those losses that we've had in parking and driving would still not be offset by this new development. And the business population loss to the community, like I said, could be even devastating for those of us who are trying to find jobs, those of us who are trying to make ends meet. Would maybe not make those gaps. So I'm suggesting that perhaps all the considerations that we've heard today, if we look at the actual data, I'm banking to say that we're at a net zero gain or loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I launch into my comment about a potential future agenda item, I want to just reiterate my gratitude and thanks for the public participation today. In my many years on this board, I too have not seen this level of engagement, so I greatly appreciate it. My comments are not related. They're not necessarily related. They're not related to the proposed e-commerce facility. My comments are informed by a Eugene resident who's been in communication with myself and Eugene City Councilor Jennifer Ye. They inform us that they have submitted anonymous complaints, toxic pollution, air quality complaints to LRAPA, and they write with more information as they're becoming increasingly frustrated with the potential offenders. I'd like to share with the board their comments, keep the commenter anonymous as is their wish. So without further ado, these are their words, not mine, but I am happy to share with you in the hopes that it becomes a future agenda item, or at the very least, I can glean more information. The neighborhoods in the northeast neighborhood area have been subjected to noxious, substantial burning chemical odors over many nights and sometime daytime hours, they write, which causes burning eyes, noses, and coughing. Due to winds, weather patterns, and research into business operations, we have determined the source to be the gravel yards based at 3600 Wildish Lane in Eugene, adjacent to the Willamette and Mackenzie rivers. We've become aware that these companies were issued 2 5-year LRAPA permits in 2020. 1 for sand and gravel extraction, and 2 for cooking asphalt, which are up for renewal. Due to multiple cement trucks, liquid tanker trucks, and dump trucks with gravel and hot asphalt entering or exiting the property on North Delta Highway, we surmise that they are exercising these activities and also batching cement. Our neighborhoods along North Delta Highway, a 2-lane residential road, abut the gravel yards, and prior to 2020 were a city-owned golf course. Now, due to heavy industrial traffic on North Delta Highway in and out of the gravel yards, our family residential neighborhoods are subjected to an onslaught of dust, dirt, silica particles, and diesel exhaust, which coat our homes, yards, and cars. This, in addition to the noxious odors at night, makes it difficult to use our yards, parks, and neighborhoods or open windows while they are present and cause health hazards for residents, domestic animals, and wildlife. Residents have recently filed complaints with LRAPA in the hope of relief from this pollution. Perhaps LRAPA and the construction companies were not aware of the effects these operations were having. We question whether these permits, along with cement batching, should be renewed, as the processes are causing almost constant air pollution. In addition, heavy industrial traffic has damaged North Delta Highway between Ayers and Green Acres Road. And the city of Eugene must redo the road and drainage culverts as a result. The gravel yards appear to have another entry-exit point on the other side of the property onto a larger thoroughfare, and we question why they don't just use that exclusively instead of routing industrial traffic through our neighborhoods. We also question how long extraction activities will be allowed to continue, since drone footage reveals that the entire area has been scraped with large pits filled with water, similar to delta ponds minus foliage. Heavy extraction activities adjacent to rivers are associated with increased flood risks to nearby areas. Thank you for your consideration, concerned Northeast neighbors. Thank you, colleagues.
All right. Any other comments from board members? All right, we'll go next to approval of the minutes of the July 10th meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Chair, I'd like to propose a motion to approve the July 10th, 2025 meeting minutes.
Second.
Second, it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the draft minutes? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor of approving the July 10th, 2025 meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Approved. I'd like to now turn to Kelly to present the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kelly Wood, Chair for the Citizen Advisory Committee. So an update from our last meeting, which was July 29th. As you guys know, we did have a meeting in August. During the July meeting, the Citizen Advisory Committee reviewed LRAPA's 2024 annual report together, page by page, and got a lot of really great feedback from the entire crew, just about the content, the layout, the design. We thought it was very user-friendly, visually appealing, easy to read. All the information provided in a clear and concise manner. So a lot of great feedback from the committee on that. We also did receive, I'm not sure if this was announced, there was a new application for the representative for Lane County Public Health. They were unavailable to interview during the July meeting, and since we didn't have one in August, we will be having that interview in September, which is great. And then the last thing was we discussed some future topics, including the smoke school, visual observation stuff, and then also some changes coming up in the titles that we can participate in. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Questions? Okay. Thank you, and thank members of the advisory committee.
Thank you so
Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is approval of financial reports. Christina, would you like to
Yes.
go there, please?
For anyone who's new to the meeting today, my name is Christina Ward. I'm our finance manager here at LRAPA. The first financial update is for the month of June 2025, which also happens to be the final month of our fiscal year. So this report actually is a snapshot of the whole fiscal year. It has not been audited yet. We've closed the books, but they are not audited. So these are not final numbers. They are just numbers as of today. What I usually do is review with you any of the footnotes that I feel are important. And you'll see that in the general fund area, there's a footnote number 1 that is next to the capital outlay line item. I'm very proud to say that our building remodel project came in at $9.60 below budget. Which there are other line items in the capital outlay line item as well that are not related to the remodel. So the overall capital outlay line item came in at 91% of the budget amount that we had available. So we were below budget in all of our capital categories, which is great. And you will also notice that the entire section of expenditures for general fund is in the green, which means we were under budget in all the areas for the general fund. The fund as a whole came in at 91% of the budgeted expenditures. And then footnote number 2 is down in the special revenue Title V section.
and it is next to the transfers to the general fund line item. We, in fiscal year 25, under budgeted the amount that we would need to transfer to the general fund that is related to indirect costs, such as the private sector would call that overhead costs, related to having office space for the employees that work directly on Title V projects and things like that. So we developed a much more accurate methodology for calculating that amount. And it resulted in the fact that we really under budgeted that line item. So the amount that we actually needed to transfer for those costs was a little bit more than 83,000. We had only budgeted 38,000. It was not a transposed number situation. It was just when we approved the budget for the fiscal year 25, I had only been with the agency about 30 days, I think it was, maybe 60 days. And so I had not had the opportunity to evaluate our previous methodology and make sure that it was as accurate as it could be. And so I did that during the fiscal year. Anyways, so that one line item was over budget, but the fund itself, within itself, came in under budget when you look at all of the line items. So we underspent in all the other areas, and so it came out in the wash, I suppose, is one way to say that. I'm from Oklahoma. I don't know if that's a phrase around here, but hopefully you understood the context. And then the next footnote is under the grant fund section, and it is related to two line items, the capital outlay and again, the transfers to the general fund. In footnote 3, it says in fiscal year 25, we did not budget for these two line items. Therefore, the spending is over 100% because we budgeted $0. It was an error for those line items. However, the overall grant fund total expenditures are only 46% of the budgeted amount. So the reason it's only 46, which seems super low when you're talking about managing a budget, is because the whole grant fund is operated on a reimbursement schedule. So we spend money on grant related activities and then the grant reimburses us for those expenses. So a lot of things can affect what we're ready to spend money on a grant program. And at the budgeting process, we are intentionally budgeting anything that we might be able to get to in that fiscal year. And then the reality of how the programs are operated oftentimes does not meet the audacious goals we set, right? And so then we rebudget the following year, taking into consideration what is still left within that grant opportunity. So it will always likely be far lower than what we budgeted, just because we budget sort of it's not a worst case scenario, it's more of a best case scenario is what we budget for. And then reality is often not in line with that. So by the end of the grants, which are multi-year grants, 100% of it will be spent. We just oftentimes can't predict exactly which fiscal year that activity will occur in, and we don't get those funds until we actually spend those amounts. Let's see, and then the next footnote is talking about the consolidated amounts between all of the funds. We came in at 75% of our budgeted expenditures. And the reason that's far lower than 100% is, again, because of that grant fund being so much lower. Does anybody have any questions for me about the financial update for June 2025?
Chair Saxon, I'll just chime in real quick. But just from a general, like, how was last fiscal year in the budget? I think that looking at the general fund and the Title V fund is really the more effective way to get a better sense of what is that under budget or over budget. The grant being 45%, which is just money that's kind of pass through dollars for us, kind of biases that. So just want to provide some clarity there on that.
That's a good point, yeah. Our regular activities are all under general fund and Title V. The grant funds are like special competitive awards for special projects that are not part of our typical operations.
Board have any questions on this?
Oops, I dropped my phone. Just trying to break it. Okay, well, then we'll move on to the July 2025 report. We typically are more than a month behind because I haven't closed the August books yet. You won't see the August report till next month, but the July books are closed. And so that is just 1 month into the new fiscal year. So it really is kind of like a underwhelming report because there's just not enough time to have any data to really talk about. I will note that I did make 3 footnotes. The first one is that well, all 3 of them are related to personnel expenses. So we are over on the general fund for personnel services, which would be salaries, benefits, all of those taxes, things like that. We're above at 13%. If we were on target, we would only be at 8% of our budget by the end of that month. But I wanted to point out it's the same for all 3 funds. The special revenue is at 11% instead of 8%, and then the grant fund is at 9% instead of 8%. The primary reason for that is once per year, employees who have accumulated a large amount of PTO, of vacation time that they have been unable to use, they are able to do a one-time per year buyout of 40 hours. We encourage staff to always take vacation because there are, huge benefits for not working yourself to the bone. But sometimes it doesn't happen that people get to take as much vacation as everyone would like. And so we allow people to do that. And this year we had several employees that did that. And so it won't happen again for those employees throughout this year. So it kind of all happened front loaded on the budget. I do believe we will still come in under budget. And I think it will level out after a couple more months. So I didn't want anybody to be shocked by that. The reason it's in the red in that final column, just to remind you, that final column is the target, the 8%. And I highlight it red if we are not on target. If we're really close to target or above it, it's red. If it's getting close, we should just keep an eye on it. It'll be yellow. And if it's right on track or way below, then it'll be green. Does anyone have any questions so far, 1 month into the year, on this financial report?
Just real quickly, thank you for the financial report. They get better and better.
Oh, thank you.
And I truly support people taking leave. I believe that is the way to maintain a healthy workplace. But just a question, and I should know because we just went through budgeting season, but do we build in a nominal number in the budget to account for vacation buy?
Well, I don't necessarily do it for this topic of vacation buyout, but we do make sure that we have it in the budget for people to take a vacation. And so the buyout really does kind of bump it up because they still have the right to take vacation this year, even though they've done that, right? So it probably is something we should consider in future years. We should look at how many people would even qualify to do that. They do have to have a bank that's large enough, and I can't remember off the top of my 550 or more. 550 or more. So most of these people have been here for years and years and years and have really accumulated a lot. So we could easily, and I will add that to the analysis next year, who is even in the qualifying category to do it. Are there only 2 people? Are there 3 people? And then just kind of
Just give you an idea what your liability is there.
Yeah.
And Ryan also mentioned that a part of that policy requires that PTO was utilized the year before too. So if you didn't utilize PTO and you are over that threshold, then the opportunity to take advantage of the cash out doesn't exist.
So you have to be both taking vacation and still having a huge balance. Yeah. So that's where we're at.
LRAPA's benefits are commendable because my private work experience, you could accumulate only so many hours and then you'd lose it.
Right.
So it's very generous benefit, I think, that we provide employees to be able to do that.
We do have,
Although you should be taking vacation,
Yeah,
obviously.
don't we have a lose it?
we do
Usually lose it?
have, a cap. I think it's really high.
Mhm.
800.
Yeah. So
300.
So eventually they quit accumulating if they've gotten, but I mean, when you have that many hours, do you need to still accumulate? You need to be taking vacation, you know?
Hey,
so.
I'll share too that a couple of years ago now, I think about 2 years ago, LRAPA internally changed the policy to the maximum cash out when someone leaves, which is maxed at 280.
You can't sell back 800.
No, you can't. You do lose it at that point. So you either gotta stay and take some vacation or, yeah. So.
Back to my hours, you should just lock their office door on them.
Well, there's work that needs to be done, so.
Touche.
Just one question on the, I know we haven't gotten paid yet from our federal and state revenues. Is there ever a time where we're concerned about cash flow throughout the year? Obviously, this is a good P&L, but cash flow, what's the worst month for us? And what is the number that we absolutely have to have in the bank to make sure that operations stay normal?
So I do a cash flow analysis actually every single day. I spend about 20 to 30 minutes making sure how many checks are still out that haven't been cashed and hit our bank, and how much do we have coming up that we're about to write checks for, is payroll right around the corner, all of those things. We try to keep our checking account at around 200,000. If it stays at over 250,000 for more than 2 weeks, I transfer an amount over to LGIP because it earns interest for us. Our leanest months are the summer months. It's the longest amount of time has passed since we've had all of our permit fee renewals revenues coming in. And so things get leaner. I oftentimes have to transfer money from our investment account at LGIP into our checking account in the summertime to keep our checking account at or above 200,000. This year we had to do that to the tune of we borrowed 400,000 from LGIP over the course of 3 months, but I have during at the end of August, I believe it was, I was able to get the 400,000 back into LGIP. So it was not out of the investment account for very long, which is ideal. Once we were able to start having our Title V permit fee revenues come in, that's when we were able to replenish what we had borrowed from the investment accounts. And I'm doing those transfers back and forth weekly. So if the checking account gets too inflated, I'm moving it into LGIP. If it gets too deflated, I'm bringing monies over from LGIP. And so even though our checking account may be lean in the summer months, as a whole, we still have very healthy reserves, and we've never had to draw down LGIP to anywhere close to being lean. Which is really good. Our healthy reserves, I haven't done a reserves analysis in the past couple of months, but we are between the 4 and 6 months of expenses category for our reserves. And if we're looking at it, not including our grant fund, we're more at 6 months of operating expenses. But when you add in the grant fund stuff, it kind of skews the numbers a little bit down to 4%, or 40%, 4 months. I don't know why I said percent. So yeah, we have lean months in the checking account because it's non-interest bearing, but we don't have lean months necessarily as a whole. That makes sense.
I think any small business would be proud to have you on their team for cash flow management. So very well done.
Thank
That's
you.
all. I mean,
Well, if you do it every day, it only takes.
Why would you do it every day?
Well,
For the rest of us?
You do it every day because that's how you check if errors are made on the bank side. Things happen, right? And so, we have a policy on our checking account that if someone initiates a ACH payment through our checking account, like say for our utility payments, we have them set up on auto pay so that we don't ever have a late payment. And it has to go through an approval process. So if I haven't set up a an instruction for automatic approval of certain things, it will reject it automatically unless it hears from me. So I do have to go in every day to check on that and make sure there aren't any pending things that I need to approve that are legitimate. But that's a way that we are safeguarding our funds and our checking account. So it only takes 15 minutes a day if you're doing it every day. But when you only do it once a month or once a quarter, it's a huge task to undertake to really see where you are financially. And oftentimes you miss things in that period of time. So I just prefer to spend my first 15, 20 minutes of the day doing that. And then I know going into the day, if something were to come up, I know exactly where we are. So yeah.
Really?
Any other questions?
Just one more, yeah, just for context. I'm guessing it's about your monthly payroll is about 140. Is that about it?
It's actually higher than that when you include all the benefits and taxes and all the liabilities that go along with payroll. It's about 110,000 per pay period. So, and that includes all the retirement and everything. And so per month would be more like 220.
Yeah, which is
For the whole
why you
agency.
keep that amount in the bank account.
It is, you got it. No matter what time of the month
Make
it
payroll.
is, I make sure that I just have on my spreadsheet that payroll is always 110,000. So I, in my mind, think we have $110,000 worth of liability at any point in time, even if we just had payday yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because I don't want the account to dip too low for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve the
Chair, I would.
the financial report?
Christina, thank you for swimming in a very particular lane of purgatory. Yes, thank you very much.
I love that
Chair,
analogy.
I'd like to move approval of financial reports for both June and July of 2025 as presented.
There's a second?
Second.
One second. Okay, discussion, I guess. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Christina.
Before we move completely on, Travis, did you want me to give a quick little update on the audit?
Oh, yes, if you want to share.
Just a couple sentences. So my goal originally was to be ahead of schedule for this year's audit, because like we've never done that. I was just gonna try a new trend. And it's not happening. So we had a staff member transition. So we're currently hiring for one of the finance team members. So I've taken on that load of work. My other finance team member, I'd like to thank real quick, Robbie Robinson is our AR specialist. She has been helping. We've kind of divided and conquered the tasks for that position that's currently open, but it has delayed my ability to really focus on the audit. The good news is because I had scheduled things to be ahead of schedule, we're still on schedule. So we're not behind schedule, but we are not as aggressively ahead of schedule as I had hoped. So we're still on track to meet our December 31st deadline for the audit to be completed. And we'll progress through the audit and then the field work where the auditors come here and interview staff and look at our records and things on site. That will happen in November instead of September, which is what I had originally scheduled with them. So I wanted to try to just move it to October, but they already had a very full schedule for October, so they had to move us to November. So that's where we're at right now. But they are confident that they can help us meet our deadline, even though I've pushed it back a little bit. So I just wanted everybody to kind of have that reality check along with me. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Travis, grant update?
Yes, Chair Howard, members of the board, I'll be brief here in the sake of kind of time, but looking at our standard monthly report on our grants, pleased to report that all of our reimbursements for the target or for the Environmental Justice Government to Government grant, which was terminated by the EPA, we have been successful in that full reimbursement of that. So that grant is now formally closed and we have made right on all of the reimbursements that's needed through the ASAP drawdown. Our work is preparing to close the first targeted airshed grant in November. So we've been working with our partners in Oak Ridge to make sure that we're getting that moving underway. Our targeted airshed grant 2, we submitted a 2-year extension request to the EPA, which is something that they can approve in-house of Region 10. So I don't think a DC involvement of EPA should slow that down. However, we have gotten feedback from Region 10, which is that they have never before once granted a 2-year extension at a time. So there may be a need to pivot to a single-year extension with potentially another opportunity to extend later down the road. The reason for a 2-year extension is essentially because our first targeted airshed grant, we had to have a 1-year extension for that grant. And we do believe that at the rate at which we're able to burn down those funds, 2 years or another year on top of the second targeted airshed grant would be necessary. So that is a potential change in our request to the EPA for a 1-year over a second year. And then also sharing not competitive grants, but LRAPA also received federal dollars for our Section 103 and 105 base grant under the Clean Air Act. These are dollars that are non-competitive and granted to LRAPA because we essentially implement the Clean Air Act in Linn County. Earlier this year with the president's proposed budget, that $1.3 billion of funding for the nation was a proposal of $100 million for the nation, so quite a bit less. So that created some need for LRAPA to hold on an open position, which we still have an open position in operations that we have not filled. The federal government's expected to pass their budget by the end of September. Currently in the Senate version of the federal bill, there's a lot of bipartisan support, and those 103, 105 grant fundings is using a 2015 allocation methodology for establishing how much funding that is. In comparison, the House version of the bill is about $1 billion less in that money, but that was a kind of party line vote for the House bill. So all signs point to the Senate bill will be the one that prevails over the two, to which our 103, 105 support should be using the 2015 methodology, which has been the methodology used over the last few years. If the Senate is unable to come to a new federal budget for the next fiscal year, October 1 is when the next fiscal year begins for the federal government, then a continuing resolution will be passed, which basically takes last year's fiscal year funding and repeats it for this year. And last year's fiscal year funding includes support in our 103 and 105. So all that is positive reflections in terms of that financial support to the organization. So wanted to share those details as well.
Yeah, the continuing resolution thing I've been reading, it's up in the air. On the airshed grant 1, you have a remaining balance of about $714,000. How much of that do you think you'll be able to expend before the grant ends?
We are planning to expend every dollar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the
The
burn rate's a lot quicker than it has been.
It is, which is why I review the finances daily. But yes, they've really ramped up their capacity to do the services that they're working on through that in Oak Ridge. So they've refined their process to the point that they are more efficient anyways, but they've also added some staff. And so it's really increased the capacity. So we will also see targeted airshed grant 2 being a faster pace as well. So.
If there is a remaining balance, does it go back to the government or does it go to roll into TAG 2?
No, it does. Unfortunately, anything that's left on the table stays on the table.
Yeah.
Reduce the national debt maybe.
Use it or lose it. You just said it a second ago.
Do use it or lose it, which is why we plan to spend every dollar.
Good plan. Any other comments on the grants? Okay, thank you for the report. We'll move on to local partner due calculations.
Chair Saxon, members of the board. Before you is the staff report for partner due calculations for fiscal year 27. In the general structure, I think of a year in to year out, I see October as the ideal, or excuse me, September is the ideal month to bring the next year's dues to the board and then potentially consider adopting or passing those dues in October. For this year, because this discussion was had in February of this year, before you is a full proposal for next year's fiscal dues. It's keeping with the same 3% CPI increase that was discussed and decided upon by the board earlier this year. If there's discussion, I'm open to the board and direction to be provided. We can move to adopt these today, or we can wait until October and move to adopt those then if there's more reflection and discussion that's warranted from the board.
Okay.
May I make a clarifying comment? What was discussed by the board I don't remember when it was. February. We adopted the calculation methodology. The board adopted that, which was to use the CPI. But I did go and look for the CPI as published as of July 2025, and that's where the 3% came from. So we've talked about the idea of where we would get the increase amount from, but we haven't talked about it being 3% this go round. Last year, I believe it was 2.9% or something like that. So it's very similar to last year's increase.
So going forward, every July will be the date that you pull the CPI data?
Yes, unless the board decides we don't want to do it in September for some reason. I'll pull whatever the most recent published data would be at the time that we're ready to do the review. So if we're going to do it every year in September, as Travis would like to do, then yes, it would be the July numbers.
And this timing is apt, so that way we can begin to have a conversation with our partners before they get firmly into their own budget cycle.
I guess the only thing I would suggest is we probably want to pull that CPI data regardless of when we take it up as a board at the same date.
Okay.
It's the way we do it. And I think it, otherwise it's going to get kind of arbitrary. So.
Right. I did take the 12-month change, instead of just the month to month. It varies a little from month to month, but yeah, we can today say we'll always take the July numbers when we're considering it.
Comments? Go ahead.
County pays a lot less than the city of Eugene. I get it.
As it should be.
I get it.
I don't know what you're gonna talk about, Matt, but yeah.
So
bigger population. The notes make it really clear as to how this was determined, but it's not lost on me that the county, our 5 county commissioners represent all of Lane County, or portions thereof. And so it doesn't seem all that equitable, but I am willing to take this back to my colleagues on council and our city manager and staff, share with them what's in front of us, and I'd like to make a decision next month, please.
Everybody,
Just say if I had it my way, we'd all be paying more, so.
Oh, if I could go back, borrow some of your time, please. It would be, I think, really helpful when we do take these back to our jurisdictions, to indicate what the ROI is. What investments are being made in each of these particular communities. So we can say, oh, okay, that's the bang for our buck, or our investments are helping our neighboring partners in our neighboring jurisdictions.
Just to help with the justification of it, right? Yeah.
Well, I think just broadly to be able to also tell our story as to what LRAPA does countywide and within each community in the county. I guess on one hand, that's pretty clear, but on the other hand, I think it helps inform our board and it helps inform our community more broadly about our mission and the investments we're making in our community.
One of the things that we did last year is Travis and I went and met with each jurisdiction just to provide some context like that. So that's also something that we're happy to do if you want to schedule that with Travis. But Travis, do we have any written materials that could also just accompany it?
Yeah, I can chime in here. I appreciate the perspective, Matt, of the what's in it for me value. And I think that that's important for us to be always communicating that narrative so it's understood. And I think that just broadly kind of on the cuff here, essentially like versions of the public engagement that we're doing on industry sources that are coming in, taking air quality complaints. When we get to the director's report, we'll talk about the dog feces odor that was very prominent earlier. And so taking those complaints and those engagements from the public and bearing some of that work and efforts, I think is all the value add that LRAPA brings, as well as the authority that the board has of how do we want to, at a local perspective, implement federal and state rules in our air regulation. But how we communicate that and make sure that that is really understood is important.
It just, in Oak Ridge, I do share the director's report at least once a year with the city council. And that does go a long way to explaining exactly what LRAPA does and what the return is, because there is a lot of good data in there. So.
And providing the annual report, I think, to elected officials would be very beneficial. I guess the other aspect too is the importance of the local contribution to getting EPA funding and kind of a matching thing. So if we're not meeting a threshold, then there's a very large risk that we wouldn't get EPA funding for the air quality program.
Howard, if I can elaborate on that, we call that a maintenance of effort. And so those federal dollars is talking about that 103 and 105, that's a non-competitive grant that we get from implementing the Clean Air Act. We have to demonstrate through what's called a financial federal report and an FFR that we submit every year that says of federal dollars, here's what we spent all of our federal dollars on, and here are the non-federal dollars. And LRAPA has to demonstrate that we're spending $1.4 million a year, and it has to increase by a minimum of $1 every year to receive that support from the EPA, which is about $350,000 a year. And partner dues helps us in our dollar counting methodology to demonstrate that we have non-federal dollars that we use to pass the spending threshold, which provides us access to those non-competitive funds. And so that's where partner dues are really important to helping us demonstrate through our keeping track of which dollars come from where and what they're being spent on to pass that threshold to give us access to those non-competitive funding.
So is it the consensus that we'll take this up and approve next month?
Sure.
Anything else on this topic? Thank you. Moving on to it's resolution 25-04. Go ahead.
Yes, Chair Howard, members of the board, this is a resolution which began with a discussion during the budget committee earlier this year. Steve Schmunk, who's on our budget committee, had questions on the total amount of unfunded actuarial liability for our PERS, which is a total of $374,655, and had some questions on how is LRAPA managing this potential liability for ourselves. Through discussion with the board, as well as some due diligent research for LRAPA on our own, it's determined that an effective way that we could address this liability is by creating a special account under our LGIP that is a board designated account to which the board can say we want this money to go into this account and it is set for this liability or whatever that specific purpose of the board determines this case would be for that liability. So before you is resolution 2504, which directs LRAPA to set that reserve account up and to essentially reserve those dollars for that liability or whatever the discretion of the board may be in that reservation. And then on an annual basis from here on out in September, we would have a review of what the funding is, what that UAL liability is, and what the board's interest is on how we continue or otherwise modify the amount that's in that account.
And at the board's discretion, that money could be used if needed for other purposes. You know, this is
So that,
accounting.
yes, so that's why we chose to call it a board designated account instead of a PERS UAL account. There may be in the future some other need that the board wants to designate funds for, and this account will allow for that as well. So we're intentionally building it to be the most flexible and useful for the board to use in the future. So if in the future it is determined we need to undesignate these funds and redesignate them to something else, you all will have the power and authority to do that.
Any questions, comments?
Travis, you're comfortable with the risk of transferring that amount of money immediately into the fund?
Yes, if there is a need for otherwise, that would be a conversation I would bring to the board where I would fully explain the context and the need and provide the board's judgment and how to respond if that need arose. But at the moment, I do not have any anticipation that that may be a cause.
Well, if there's no further discussion, I guess I'd entertain a motion to approve resolution 25-04.
There you go, Chair, I have a motion. I move to approve and adopt resolution 25-04, establishing a board designated local government investment pool, LGIP account in the amount of $374,655.
there a second? Okay. Seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah. Are there any other boards within the state that have such a flexible account attached to PERS liability?
I don't think that I can answer that question, but because I have not looked into it. But we did when we were trying to answer the questions during the budget committee discussions about the UAL, we did look at all the different ways we could safe harbor some money for that. One of the ways was to open a side account directly with PERS. We during those discussions kind of determined that that was not the best, most flexible way for us to proceed because we earn far more interest at the LGIP account than would ever be accounted for through that PERS side account. And PERS themselves don't recommend that we open a side account because our UAL is so much smaller than any of their other agencies that they are working with. And so because our liability is so small, they don't even think it's a good idea for us to do that. I really trust them if they're saying, no, you don't need to do that, because I would think they would say, yes, please give us more money, right? If they thought that that was really needed. Okay. And so honestly, we don't need to set up this side account, but the board wanted to be a little bit more conservative about safe harboring some dollars for this should we have to pay into PERS at any given point in time. The reason I wasn't as concerned about the UAL is because we don't have anybody right now that qualifies to retire. And we don't have a long history of people that have already retired. So there's not a lot that would have to be moved out of PERS into retirement payments at this time. That's why also PERS isn't that concerned about it, because we just haven't been in the PERS system long enough for it to be a huge risk that we would need to pay on that liability.
Fascinating.
Right. And so there's really not a pressing need for us to open this account LGIP. It was more a conservative approach to protecting those dollars and knowing that they're in a separate account. I'm not going to be transferring in or out of that account without board direction.
Right.
So it just kind of it's our own little savings account to make sure we at least have money to help us cover any future PERS expenses.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I also appreciate how broad it is in that a future board could reappropriate the dollars or redesignate the dollars. That comes with some risks in that if a future board where none of us are here with a different executive director and a different financial director, and there's this growing account meant for something, but is changed to something else, do we do a disservice to what it's meant for as those PERS employees rapidly approach their retirement? So I'm conflicted here. Your comments give me a little less heartburn, but on one hand, I appreciate the flexibility. On the other hand, I'm cautious about the flexibility if it's not necessarily needed at this juncture.
Right.
When I believe it was a previous agenda item at another meeting that the three options were given as do nothing, open an account with PERS, or open this account with the board's blessing to do it as vague as it is so that we had opportunity if there was another construction project or something. And this is what we voted for.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just exactly what we voted for, right?
Right. Also, the reason that we're building it as a board designated account is so that if there were some catastrophic grant funding loss and we did have a shift in need, you would have the ability as a board to vote to redesignate in case of a financial hardship, right? Not that you would be redesignating it on a whim, more as a way to protect the agency from failure.
We'll know it's coming on a day-to-day basis. So.
I think there's some value of at least having this account so that there's awareness that there is a potential funding requirement down the road, because especially those that aren't live and breathe PERS, we weren't necessarily aware that there was this UAL. So I think there's some value in doing that.
Yeah.
Counselor Keating, I'll also share that my intent is to make this, is broadly for LRAPA to provide more structure and consistency through transition that may be. So the person behind myself in my role or other roles, Christina's role, my intent is every September, this is a topic that comes up. We have a report about here's what the current account balance is, here's what the UAL is, here's the reason or justification or thought process, the intent behind this action, and that being an ongoing, continuous expectation with the structure to provide that reflection every year. What is this funding? What's it for? And do we like where it's at, or do we want to make adjustments? Which is simply would be a board reflection and authority to provide any new direction or otherwise.
I appreciate it. This conversation has helped greatly.
Yeah, I do also want to say it's not that we're appropriating it. Appropriations are done through the budget process. So it's not it would never be a reappropriation. They are unappropriated dollars that are in our reserve account already. So if we were to need to spend them, we would have to go through the appropriations process. They are just reserved for future use at this time and not appropriated.
So question, is there a secondary interest lost possibly with this? Because I know in some accounts that we've done for work, when you have a certain balance, you're earning more interest when you have a lower balance. So if we move this sub 400,000 into a secondary account, are you going to be gaining less interest on that than we would if we left it alone?
No, LGIP doesn't have those kind of restrictions. So whatever interest rate they determine is going to be applied to the previous month or however they're doing their calculations. It applies across the board to all LGIP accounts. So it doesn't matter. And it will still be connected to our other account. We have, our account will have two sub accounts. It'll have our main reserve account and then this board designated account. So our bank statements will show both balances adding up to the same total, basically.
Gotcha. I would expect this number on 5 years exactly when you got started the PERS system is going to show a huge increase at that point.
And I don't know for sure because I'm new to PERS myself. But they did say that at the 5-year mark, that they would be able to more accurately determine what our UAL would be.
And I like the way it's set up, and I think that's why you have a board of directors that they'll make the decision and won't do something indiscriminate or stupid. But
any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 2504. If there's no more discussion, I'll call for the question. All in favor of adoption, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Good discussion. All right. Move on to permitting and federal standards rulemaking.
Yes, Chair Sachs and members of the board. Similarly, where I tap into a lot of help from Christina on financial topics, this will be one where Max will be my support on the federal standards rulemaking. So what is listed here in the staff report is the table that I think is the most sort of interesting and relevant component for the board, and I will kind of walk through these items for folks. But to start, in 2023, LRAPA went through a rulemaking process to update some of our permitting rulemakings. That started in 2023, and it was on September 5th, so just about a week ago, when that rulemaking was finally published in the Code of Federal Register. So from a timeline perspective, these rulemakings are a multi-year process. The EPA under the new administration has made commitments to faster SIP processing, which is essentially getting these rules published in the Code of Federal Register. So hopefully that will be quicker, but it's ideal timing for us to just wrap up our last 2-year rulemaking to beginning another one. And so this is a collection of all of our titles across that are in need of an update for our air permitting perspective. With it is some fee increases that are for greenhouse gas reporting for our state fees, which is currently a 12% on their annual permit with no maximum cap. The proposed change is to align that with the DEQ fee structure of 20% or $500, whichever is greater, with a amount of $9,000. Also some changes in fee structure for the gasoline dispensing facilities and a new ACDP source category, which essentially closes a loophole of those who emit emissions but doesn't necessarily fall into a category of us for air permitting. So That's some of the fee increases that is being proposed in this rulemaking that we want to begin. And then other important items is in the titles themselves, specifically repealing some titles. So on that table, Title 30, which I've provided a printout of Title 30 for folks to grab if they want to look at this. But the proposal is to rescind Title 30, and Title 30 is LRAPA's incinerator regulations, and then to implement DEQ's regulations by rule. And so the context I think that's important to share with the board here is our Title 30 is for incinerators, which are crematories, which in Lane County, there are 8 crematories that have a permit with us. And that's the only sources that have a permit under Title 30 with us. But included in Title 30 are standards for solid waste as well as infectious waste incineration. We do not have any sources that follow those rules and regulations. And because of that, throughout years, we have not gone through rulemakings of Title 30 to update those rules. And at this point, DEQ's alternative or comparable rules are more strict than what LRAPA's current Title 30 is. So in essence, if a source came into the county and wanted to get a permit through Title 30 under a solid waste or infectious waste incineration, we would not be able to use our title to write that permit. Instead, we would have to look to the state rules because they are more stringent. Now, the amount of effort and energy from an internal staff perspective to go through this rulemaking and update it to bring our rules in line with the state rules is pretty arduous. And so another alternative that we can do is we rescind the title and implement through reference to DEQ's rules, which are already updated, and they will go through that rulemaking to keep those rules updated. An alternative that we can consider as well is we hold on to the crematory aspects of Title 30, to which there are 8 crematories and 8 sources in Lane County that do have a permit under our regulations, and then only rescind those incinerator rules that we don't have any permit for in Lane County, and then implement through reference DEQ's rules. So that's a proposal which I think is a way to update the rulemaking without bringing a lot of work into the organization to update rules to which nobody would necessarily be taking advantage of or needing. And then the other, I think, real important title to point out here is Title 39. This is another proposal for a complete repeal of Title 39, and Title 39 is our PM10, so PM standing for particulate matter, and 10 being the larger pollutants in sort of micrograms per cubic meter size. And these were emergency measures for what LRAPA's authority would be if the Eugene Springfield airshed was not able to meet the National Ambient Air Quality Standards and go from non-attainment into maintenance. DEQ had these rules backed up on their own ORS. DEQ has already rescinded these rules from their ORS because the Eugene Springfield area has been in maintenance for PM10 for almost 20 years now. And so these are items that we still have on our rules, but because the area is in attainment, there's no regulatory path to ever utilize any of these rules. And so for a sake of simplicity and organization, to rescind that title.
I just ask, so if, for whatever reason, we did go out of attainment on PM10, would this plan or these kind of like the contingency response kind of just be like out of date at this point because it was written probably decades ago?
Right. So if we were, so every so many years, the EPA goes through an attainment designation where they look at all the airsheds and they look at the monitoring and they say who's not meeting the federal standards, and then you get kind of put on notice, and you have 3 years as a region to bring your air quality into that federal standard. And if you're unable to meet it, we would have to come up with a maintenance plan, which would need to be adopted by the board, adopted by the EQC for DEQ, and then published in the SIP. These PM10 contingency plan drafted in the past, would those implementations, would those items be relevant in 2020 in a PM10 issue? I don't believe so.
I'm seeing it was adopted in 91. So
yes.
Yeah.
What are typical emitters of PM10?
It's all your general wildfire, really is one, but home heating, outdoor burning, as well as our industry sources. But PM2.5 is really the more harmful pollutant size. And we can use PM25 as a stand-in essentially for PM10. So the regulatory focus and effort is on the PM25.
Okay. With respect to Title 30, if you if the state changes the regulations, then we'd have to go through the regulatory approval too, if we didn't just incorporate by reference. The DEQs, right?
Yeah.
So there is some efficiency just by basically piggybacking on to DEQ's regulations rather than just having our own Title 30, which would essentially be the same as DEQs anyway.
Right, and so it comes down to a decision of the body, the board, of where does LRAPA want to be more strict than the state and where is the state comfortable in being the same as the state. For Cleaner Air Oregon, our approach on implementing Cleaner Oregon Lane County is we implement those rules by reference as opposed to adopting our own specific Cleaner Oregon rules. So we do utilize this approach in other aspects of our stationary source programming.
But to propose regulations that are more stringent than the state or EPA is a pretty difficult and onerous process. You have to provide a lot of justification as to why you're more stringent.
Earlier, when I was talking about Title 20 for the e-commerce facility, which is more strict than DEQ, and that is more an artifact of LRAPA not updating those titles as time has moved on. The Title 20 was last updated in 1990.
That's when carbon monoxide levels were concerned, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the Title 30 question, were you able to have any conversations with any operators of any crematoria at all within the region, or any specifically anybody that was governed by a Title 30?
Well, aside from our general relationship that we have with them on issuing the permit, on this particular idea, no, not yet. Our most recent discussion or connection we've had with our crematories is earlier this year. So in Title 30, which the rules are there, it says that crematories have to burn at a temperature of 1800 degrees or higher. So this summer, the state legislature passed a rule requiring that that not be any greater than 1600. So we connected with our crematories through what's called an NPJ, a notice of penalty, no penalty justification, which says our rules and your permit says 1800 degrees. The state legislator said we can require no more than 16. And so we will not enforce on that permit condition, but keep it above 16. So that's the most recent connection we've had with our crematory sources.
And we would just expect that through this kind of years-long rulemaking process that we're going to be considering initiating, that's when the conversations would happen with the crematoriums regarding potential impacts.
Yes, and so the public process will include outreach to those who are connected. Also, the Citizen Advisory Committee. So Kelly mentioned that we have some rule review that we'll be doing. Right now, the first on the docket is our asbestos title, which is Title 43, and enforcement, which is Title 15. But as we move into this rulemaking, those two will be engaging the CAC, as well as then others who it directly connects to, such as those who currently have a permit under the rules.
Any other questions, comments?
All right.
Is there a motion on this item?
This is essentially an FYI update to the board to say that a rulemaking is about to be underway, and the broad strokes are some kind of updating to our regulatory needs, the potential for rescinding some titles. If the board has a opinion or perspective on a full rescinding of Title 30 or a partial rescinding of Title 30 while keeping the crematory regulatory scope in our titles, that insight is appreciated in direction, but otherwise it's more of a checking to see if there's any concern or heartburn from the board.
Yeah, there were just motion options in the packet. That's what I was asking. Okay, no problem.
Oh, sure enough.
Show enough.
Sure enough.
Show enough.
Come out in the wash.
Laundry's on the line.
So, with the options, I guess, the question for us really is, do we, as a board, concur with staff's recommendation and approach or not? What's the time schedule for this?
So the rulemaking will be us internally getting all of our rule edits together and what those look like in the rules. Then it begins a engagement with the EPA because these are SIP items, so state implementation plans. So we have to provide them with a 6-month lead time on when we think we will have rules to them for them to review. And we like to have that review done before we engage with DEQ to have it pass through the EQC. So our most recent rulemaking started in 2023 and just concluded last week. So this is a multi-year process, but the EPA federal administrator, Lee Zeldin, has committed to faster SIP approvals. So perhaps we will see less of an extended timeline on this, but it is a multi-year process.
Paying the Golden Gate Bridge.
Start over once you get to the end. Yeah.
I do also briefly want to express appreciation to Max for helping me recognize, getting to this point with the board, I didn't have nearly as broad of a table of items I wanted to bring to the board for rulemaking. Through Max's kind of reflection and mentorship, helped me understand that a SIP engagement is a lot of work. And so if we're going to go down this road, we should take a big bite and chew on it all at once. So thanks, Max, for that.
You need to hire a consultant to assist Max.
We do have a permit writer position that is open, and we'll be hoping to bring good support and help.
Are you in the labor market?
No, not for this particular. While fascinating, it's just not my wheelhouse.
I've been there and done that.
You need that retirement hobby, right?
So what's the pleasure of the board? I mean,
since I've been on the board, we've had these conversations in the past about rulemaking and stuff like that. I think the group and the team that we have at LRAPA knows exactly what is necessary to maintain the standards that we need so that we're not getting those swift hands that you talked about from the federal government, right? Making sure we're staying on point while keeping our population's best interests in mind. So I think whatever you guys believe is the best path to be taken is what we would follow.
So the staff's recommendation on the motion options are number one, is that correct?
Correct.
Does the number one option, Chair, include the piece about rescinding Title 30 and holding on to the regulatory oversight over our 8 partners in the crematorium industry?
As Title I or the option 1 would be to rescind the whole title fully, but if there's a perspective that we take an alternative approach, I think that this would be a good place to have that consensus be established.
But we would maintain our regulatory authority. We would just be using the DEQ rules to regulate.
Right. Yes.
So it would probably be increasing the stringency to some degree of the regulations on the crematorium if we match DEQ, because ours, to my understanding, are slightly out of date.
Well, so
We can never be under the DEQ's regulations, period.
Right, we have to be as stringent. So on the aspects of Title 30, such as the incinerations that's not crematory, those rules are at the moment, as written in Title 30, not as stringent as DEQ's current rules. So in a hypothetical example, if we received an application from a source that would need to use that part of our Title 30 to write them their permit, because that aspect is not as currently strict as the state as written, we would already just look to the state ORSs and then implement through that approach either way. And the reason why we have the delay or our rules are not as strict is because over time, as we've gone through what is the amount of resources we want to invest into updating these rules, the reflection has been, well, no source currently uses any of these rules, so we don't necessarily think that it's apt for us to implement those rule changes. And so we could go through that process of updating Title 30 to be as stringent as the state. It would be, as Max describes to me, a fair amount of lift for us to do that. And so a more effective approach is we rescind those aspects and then just implement in reference to the state. And when they update those aspects of the rule, if we're pointing to them by reference, we automatically see that update take place.
So just a naive question coming from building industry. I know in the international building codes, residential codes, when you're writing adoptions as a state or an entity, you can just, when you get to a certain section, you can say as stated in the IBC section, blah, 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 right? Can you not just do that if you wanted to rescind, if we're already not as stringent as the state, if you just wanted to erase what you have there and just say as adopted by the state's whatever section it is, can't you do that without having to go through the heavy lifting and legwork just to reword your Title 30?
I think that's essentially what we're kind of proposing to do here. And Max, do you have any added reflections?
Maybe just a clarifying question. So you're saying that we wouldn't have to go through a rulemaking process to do that? We're just rescinding and pointing to the state rules, or is that?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering as a question. If you didn't have to rework the entire Title 30, you could just say, we adopted the state rule as written with no.
Yeah, we would still have to go through a rulemaking process, but that's kind of the approach that we would take, or, that
It'd be the easiest route for you to take, right?
we can only do like typo changes without going through a rulemaking process.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, make a move to take a directive to initiate the rulemaking to fully update the rules as described, directing the staff to proceed with the formal rulemaking process.
Second.
Seconded. So we have a motion and a second. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion, which is to adopt motion option number 1, approve initiation rulemaking to fully update the rules as described, directing staff to proceed with formal rulemaking process. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
You do the same thing as me. When you're reading, you have to bounce with the words.
Yeah, right. It's an age thing, I think.
Get the cadence right.
Thank you. Good discussion again. Director's report.
Yes, 2 minutes here before the 2 o'clock hour. But so quick, as always with the director's report, if all you read is the executive highlights, you'll essentially get the fine details that are out of the report in general. Our highest day of AQI through July and August was on August 27th with an AQI of 82 out in Oak Ridge. We do have wildfires burning in the Willamette National Forest. The largest one is the lightning-caused emigrant fire, which began on August 24th. Notable items for us throughout the month of July and August was 114 air quality complaints that could best be described as a strong odor of dog waste. Lots of different ways to describe that, but dog waste is the one I will use here. Unfortunately, we were unable to really pin down what a potential source was for that. Usually when we receive complaints, if they are centered and close to one another, that is really helpful to provide, okay, where might be this potential cause. In this particular instance, they were from Coburg all the way down to South Eugene and as far out to Thurston, which was such a widespread area. It was really difficult to really get a sense of what that explicit cause may be. We did take those complaints seriously, and we did spend time and effort trying to determine what the source may be, but unfortunately we came up empty-handed on that regard. Another very big component for us in our work was the indirect source construction permit, which we talked about earlier with over 300 comments received, so I won't belabor that further. From a community engagement perspective, we participated in the Springfield Block Party, which was a great success. That's a wonderful little event that continues to grow larger and larger, and we were glad to be a part of it. Also participated at Oak Ridge National Night Out. Matt Sorensen went up there, and Matt was also able to get 5 purple air sensors from the EPA with commitments to find some good rural community or places to put those in. Also organizationally, we're currently at 84% staff capacity. We had 2 staff members transition away from the organization, and so we're replacing those. One is a finance position, the other one is the operations position. For our database, internal database, that continues to go well. We have a contract with LCOG to essentially write and update that database. They lost their developer to retirement and are unsure when they will have that support be replaced. So we're working with LCOG to move basically the code onto a GitHub repository so we directly have more access to that. And we're exploring just a contract with a contractor ourselves that we can arrange so they can work on Linfo on our behalf. And we did have some improvements, I believe, to our audio video. We had a pretty poor lag between audio and video that I think has been addressed at this point. And then finally, Homewood heating and outdoor burning season begins October 1st, and before long we'll see the winter or the season change, and wintertime wood smoke will be more of a conversation point for us internally.
Any questions, Travis? I'd like to compliment you and staff and Matt. I've seen Matt on TV a lot. And the amount of community outreach, I think, has just been night and day. And I think there's a lot of value in getting LRAPA out into the public domain, if you will, whereas years past, I think it was not so much. So, you guys are doing a great job, and I think there's a lot of value, especially when we talk to our community partners about what LRAPA does. I think it certainly helps with the message. So anyway, I think you're doing great.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to ask with respect to Councilor Keating's comments earlier about the problem in Northeast Eugene. I assume that staff is looking into that.
Yeah, I can share that what Matt speaks to earlier in his comments. I knew very much and was very well aware of the group of individuals who I think connected with you, Matt, and that is we're engaging with them and seeing through what our regulatory might allows, what operation and maintenance plans and otherwise can we engage with the source to figure out ways to better address some of their concerns.
Great, thank you.
And can we request like an update on that in the next month's agenda? Some of the source or status of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Sorry to
no,
get out of line here.
No, you're fine. Yeah, and if there's anything you want to see on the agenda, please let me or Travis know, and we'll definitely put that on the agenda. So.
Yes, if there's a reason for me to put a presentation together, I kind of enjoy that. So.
Well, we'll expect a multimedia with background music or something.
Lights turned down.
Yeah, I'd like to do exactly.
Careful what you ask for.
On the topic of adding things to the agenda, you can, there is a board calendar on page 14 of the director's report. And so as we check things off the list, we do a strike through, and then if things need to be added, we update it each time. So you can kind of get an idea of what we're gonna hopefully speak about, and then it might help you to say, oh, and I'd also like to do this, and communicate it.
Well, if there's nothing else, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Some really good discussions today. It's good to see all the members of the community out.
You know what the zoning is out there at the airport where they're proposing to build a distribution center? Is that something else we're gonna have to get changed?
Yes.